Hi, today is my birthday, so I wanted to make a special video. This time I am going to talk about the importance of tabletop role-playing games in current times. For me, they are actually vital. They are part of my everyday life. Even if you don't play tabletop role-playing games every day, in my personal case, in my opinion, I think it's important to do at least a little bit something, even if it's something small, related to tabletop role playing games. Maybe you want to work on that encounter for an adventure that you're going to run with your group. Maybe you're going to play a solo role playing game. Maybe you just want to read one of those role playing games that you want to bring to the table, but your players are not interested in playing that role playing game. Perhaps plan ahead on how you are going to run that role playing game as a solo game. Mm, Maybe you want to read some fiction, some comic books or short stories related to the setting of a particular role playing game. So there are many things that you can do, even if it's just a small thing to keep that role playing game flame going, to keep that hit alive. So, like I said, I think role playing games are very important in current times. I think there is not a single person that hasn't identified or become aware of how we are living in how the Chinese call it interesting times. There is a sort of there's a lot of chaos and mayhem related to many things, all areas, in politics, in society, anything related to the economy. It's just everywhere. This sense of chaos, of the unpredictable. Hmm. So that's what I like of role playing games, because when we go into those fictional worlds, we are trying to make sense of things. I think that's one of the reasons as to why some dystopian, gonzo, chaotic, sometimes even villainous role playing games are so popular nowadays. Just take a look at some of the role playing games that I have been reviewing in my channel. A lot of them have to do with anti heroes and villains and dark settings. Like, for example, SLA Industries, mm, the Dark Lord role playing game, The Wicked Ones. You can play as anti heroes, villains, something in between, and you have these dreadful settings. I think a lot of people feel attracted to those sort of themes, mm, because we are trying to understand the different turbulent situations in our everyday life. But it also goes beyond that. I think that role playing games in general are a source of cultural and scientific understanding. Even if you play a fictional setting that is something that is not historical or even pseudo historical, even if you play something related to fantasy or science fiction, science fantasy, there is always something that gets your mind going in a particular direction. Maybe you see something related, like I said, to science, to a particular aspect of humanity, and you want to know more about that. Like, for example, when I first started to play Dungeons and Dragons many years back, well, not that many, several years, let's say, mm, I started to think about survival situations, because you see those characters going on those epic journeys, moving through the countryside and the wilderness, and you start to think beyond the simple roll that you make to see if you manage to camp successfully without random encounters. You start to think, how can they survive in those places? You could also say that video games, it depends on the person, but sometimes they also awaken that curiosity within you. For example, the swamp. I've always thought, how can you camp in the swamp? For those of you that have camped in the swamp, it's probably a no-brainer. But for someone that is not really used to going camping every day, at least back then when I was just starting to play Dungeons and Dragons, I thought, how can they do that? And later on, I learned that there are several important steps that you need to follow to camp in the swamp. For example, you need to stay in the driest area possible, stay away from anything wet and soggy, and you should remove your shoes every 15 minutes at least. That's the safest way of doing it. But of course, if you are chasing someone or if you are being chased, sometimes you do not have that luxury. But if you, let's say that you are moving in your typical Dungeons and Dragons adventure and you're not particularly hasty about the process of moving through the swamp, it's a good idea to introduce those details to make the setting come alive. That, oh, you're moving through the swamp and every now and then you have to remove your shoes and just like uh, get some water out of them if it got some swampy water into the shoe. And when it comes to camping, you need to find, like I said, the driest area to avoid problems with parasites, leeches, all sorts of infections. It's always a good idea to build like a shelter at even above ground level. For example, if there are some sturdy looking trees in the swamp, you could create like a hammock or platform of sorts to sleep. It's always good to have it at a certain height, at the very least at shoulder height, so you can keep relatively safe from some predators and insects. I think it's much better to raise it even higher. You know how some alligators and crocodiles, sometimes they are pretty surprising when it comes to the distances that they can reach. And so you have to keep all of those things in mind. And what about very cold and hot environments? Like in the snow and the desert. Sometimes you are able to keep warm in the cold mountains by just digging a hole. Just dig a hole in the snow and you go inside and you actually keep yourself warm. Although there are some important things to consider. For example, if you are creating a very tight space, it's always a great idea to at least put your nose outside to obtain some air, some oxygen. You don't want to asphyxiate yourself. And in the desert, you can also do that in some. It's better to find some mountainous places or some dunes that are somewhat stable. You can also build a hole and you can keep relatively cold in those places. I also thought, how can the player characters keep clean? Sometimes they do not have access to water. It is possible to keep yourself clean when you are using substances or materials such as ash. The ash actually has antibacterial properties. You can also use sand, the air itself, and the sun. I have always wondered about our ancestors. In my case, I heard from ancient or old Germanic warriors who just bathed rarely. You know how in they always have that rumor that, oh, the Germanic ancient or old people, they were so dirty, and but there is actually a misconception. Well, for starters, the I really don't want to offend people from the UK, but the old Englishmen, they bathed like every 2 or 3 weeks, and I think in France it was also not very not appropriate if you were bathing yourself constantly. It is only later on that they introduced concepts of hygiene. But in the case of these Germanic warriors, they always said, oh, they were really stinky and they were not hygienic, you would say very clean, because they only bathed once a week during Saturdays. But it turns out that the air itself and the sun can actually keep your body clean. And you know how I've been practicing sun gazing? Ever since I've been practicing sun gazing, I've only taken a shower once a week, because every day of my life I always expose as much skin as possible during the sun hours, the safe hours. You can do it 1 hour after sunrise and 1 hour before sunset, you remove your clothes and you let the sun. I spend 45 minutes with the sun bathing my skin, and like I said, I only shower during Saturdays. Can you believe it? And as you can see, I don't have like skin rashes, and I don't have like, what would you call that thing? Dandruff. I don't have any of those things, and I only shower during Saturdays. How about that? You could say, oh, that's pretty outrageous, right? In fact, I am kind of like exposing myself to ridicule, but I have verified that the sun actually keeps your body clean. And those people that usually constantly shower and use those chemical shampoos, they're usually, their hair is quite, how could you say it? Some of them end up bald and they end up with horrible hair. But in my case, like I said, I'm pretty amazed at these survival related things. And I've always felt like role playing games are served as inspiration for me to discover these things. I always saw these things and I thought, is there something else? Is there some sort of truth? And like I said in my other, like in my Conan related videos, that I said, well, Conan is always shirtless in most of cases. He's always swimming and drinking from natural water that is constantly being exposed to sunlight. And Conan is always eating as naturally as possible. So that also served as inspiration. So every time as when I play a role-playing game, I always think, is there some truth to that science-related element? Maybe that thing that looks quite fictional, maybe there is some truth behind that. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't shower regularly. Maybe that's maybe you do not have access to the sun. There are some very dark places in this world, but like I said, the Germanic warriors, they were used to these skies that were constantly cloudy. So I think the sun is quite powerful and can keep your body clean. I've spent doing this for about a year, more or less, a year, just taking a shower every Saturday, and every day of the week I take a different sort of shower in the sun. I expose my almost my entire body to the sunlight, and the sun eliminates all of the bacteria. Because if you do not eliminate the bacteria in your body, there is a risk of infection. If you cut yourself, for example, and you haven't cleaned yourself up, the bacteria is going to get inside that wound. So, like I said, I think there are many things that you can discover through role-playing games. If you take a look at a particular culture in a role-playing game, even if it's a fictional take on that culture, you kind of feel like that curiosity, that need to know more. So, role-playing games for me are a platform for me to discover more things about history, about the world, about science. Maybe some of you already saw my video where I talked about Kentaro Miura and Berserk and the influence of Berserk in my life. I'm going to put a link in the description below for those of you that haven't seen that video. But yes, role-playing games are truly fascinating. And I also think that it's important that you only think about what you and your group likes to do. Because in current times, they are always trying to push politics into role-playing games, and that's something very sad. Sometimes people do not understand the love or appreciation of certain older gamers when it comes to role-playing games in a few decades back. I'm only 39 years old. I am far from being like the stereotype of the grognard. But when I compare all of those moments back then to current times, there is a certain admiration that I developed for players that played role-playing games back then. Because when role-playing games first came out, we had many things against us. The stereotypes, that it was a very... When it was handled as a negative thing, that it was a very dorky, very like a loser sort of hobby. And we were also getting constantly attacked by Christians, that it was a Satanist thing. So when you see someone talking with fondness or even appreciation or admiration of those decades, those old role-playing game decades is because they remember how they were true, were loyal to their love of the hobby. They had to go against so many things. And in current times, you see many people trying to twist role-playing games towards particular political agendas, and they really do not have a good appreciation or love towards the hobby. They play it because it is a popular thing. If role-playing games were not accepted as something almost like when celebrities play them, for example in different videos, people would not play them because of the fear of being ostracized. But those that enjoyed role-playing games since the very start, they are truly worth admiring because they stood their ground against all opposition and criticism and attacks. So that's inspirational as well. When you play a role-playing game, just think about what you like, what your group likes. If someone in your group doesn't like the way that you are running things, or if you are playing a group and you don't like how that group plays, handles different situations, you need to decide if you want to leave that group or if you want to keep on playing. You could have a conversation as to why you like this or that or dislike this or that, and if you do not reach an agreement, well, just move on and find another group. Nobody is forced to have things in your game world that you do not like. So it all depends on what you enjoy and of the setting, of course. There are some things that I dislike of current times, but I still introduce them in dystopian settings, because how would you have a dystopian setting without different degenerate attitudes? So that adds realism, in my opinion. So I hope you enjoyed this video. These were just some random thoughts that I had during my birthday. I'm going to keep on producing reviews and more videos with topics related to role-playing games in general. I'm also starting to think what I'm going to do this month of October, because you know, a lot of you already know that I like horror related things and related to the occult. So I am thinking about the videos for this month of October, just like so I don't get caught off guard, because sometimes you say, well, I'm going to leave things until August or September, and suddenly it's already October and I'm already caught unaware. So if you have any ideas for this month of October when I'm going to be producing some videos, please comment in the comment section below. I will see if I can produce some videos related to that. I mentioned in a previous video that I have already received this board game, role-playing game hybrid. I have already played it, and it's really good. So I'm going to review that one, perhaps, like I said, perhaps in a month. So I hope you will watch that review. I want to keep it as a surprise. Well, thanks for watching this video, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending Right Through RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. And I think that in 1 or 2 days, it's going to, the Christmas in July event in Right Through RPG is going to start. There are going to be a lot of sales and perhaps bundles. They sometimes handle these bundles, or purchase this book and you get this other one included and things like that. So I hope you check out those offers, those special sales. Once again, thank you, and see, and comment anything that you want to share, your ideas, your opinions about anything, about this video, about other things. Please let me know in the description below. In the comment section below, sorry. See you later.